Every business has a logo, and when it's yours, it matters. GPS is a 30-year local Las Vegas company that produces custom merch, like hats and apparel, drinkware and totes, blankets and bandanas, really any kind of swag you can imagine that features your logo or message. They're experts at finding or creating the right products for the season and the reason that fit your budget and timeline. Check out the GPS website at gpslasvegas.com, where there's a world of products to promote your brand.
Homelessness is front of mind for so many people in the community. It was a major issue in the recent mayoral election, and oftentimes government agencies and even cities themselves point the fingers at each other like that famous Spider-Man meme. But how does it look on the ground? Today on CityCast Las Vegas, we talk with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Undersheriff Andy Walsh about how LVMPD is engaging with the population of folks who are unhoused, the challenges on the street, and what's his official position on the recent camping bans by local governments. Oh, and stick around after the interview because contributor Kim Foster sat down with Dr. Dempsey from Juve MD to discuss how she's dedicating her medical practice to helping women navigate the life-changing effects of menopause. It's Monday, November 11th. I'm David Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Andy, let's start with new laws that are making camping by people experiencing homelessness unlawful. The city of Las Vegas has already passed that law, but expanded it. The county commission adopted it countywide. What would a person need to be doing to be in violation of these laws?
The basic thing that my understanding is they have to be otherwise camping, setting up a structure, sleeping in a public place that when there's opportunities for them to not be there, right? That it's illegal to camp in public, in a public park, in a public space, blocking a sidewalk, et cetera. So those are the things that are there.
And I guess the answer that you just gave is that, you're looking for a legal reason to engage with folks to maybe not arrest them, but to do something else. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And look, there's no ambition on our part to start to fill the jail. I think what this law does for us is, and we've seen a lot of interactions in other jurisdictions that, you see officers having these interactions with folks that are unhoused that turn into violent confrontations. And from a legal perspective, it always starts back to what was the purpose of the interaction. So I think this gives us a little bit of an advantage when we say, hey, this is the law that you're violating, and this is why we're having this conversation with you, and this is what services you have available. I think it's also puts pressure on municipalities so that there are some services other than jails to be the facilities where homeless people wind up. And the efforts to get people out of homelessness, which is an incredible endeavor to get someone who is persistent, who's made the decision to be living in that part of society and not be housed. I think in my experience working downtown, a lot of the folks, they actually want to be homeless. There are numerous cases where people are like, I don't want to be with my family. I don't want to be in a home.
Yeah.
And look, I like to make sure that, and what I'm pleased about is our cops have enough tools available to make a decision that doesn't result in an arrest. That's the goal.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming based on what I'm hearing is that you agree with your colleague who says that you really don't want to use this new law to arrest people and that you're going to show great restraint in arresting people. Is that fair approach?
That's fair because every law, it has to have some teeth, right? It can't be just we're never going to enforce this. Are we going to make arrests out of this? Sure. I'm sure there's going to be scenarios where arrests are made and this charge is used, but that there should be a pattern where it's the last resort. That's the expectation. Because just putting people in jail simply because they're homeless is not, we know that doesn't solve the problem.
You did mention a couple of different scenarios that bring people to the street, that there's some people who, just that's where they want to be. There's others who are addicted to various drugs. There's people suffering from mental illness. We see so many categories. I'm wondering, are you training your officers on the street to have different approaches to these folks who are in these different categories?
Yeah, sure. Many times folks in these categories, we might only come across them when they're in a crisis that's, being driven by a mental health episode or a drug and alcohol withdrawal, addiction, a lot of things that could fuel. So, we've done critical crisis intervention team training for 2 decades now with all our officers are certified in that. We teach our officers how to communicate with folks in a crisis, how to recognize the crisis, and then assemble resources really is the goal, whatever resources may be necessary to help people through that.
Yeah, what kind of resources does Metro have available readily to it in these different situations?
Yeah, so we have a homeless outreach team that goes out every day, and the goal with them is to identify, where the camps are and what the people in the camps need, and they work closely with the city and the county resources. But there's also within our homeless outreach team, we have certified social workers that work with our folks as well. So when there's a component to try to bridge the gap between homelessness and not being homeless or unhoused or medical resources. And then within the Clark County Detention Center as well, when people are leaving the jail, there's a program called DSD Cares. And really what it is so let's just say I put it in story scenario for the audience. So if I'm a guy, I've been in jail for 9 months at the Clark County Detention Center, and I don't have physical identification like a driver's license, for example, and I'm leaving, I've been on medication while incarcerated, I've been getting good care.
And you don't have an address.
And now I'm leaving, right? Now I'm okay, congratulations, you've served your time, here's the door, right? What hope does that person have once their feet hit the ground that, Bridger and 4th Street, right? It's a challenge. So we give them tools before they leave. It's typically within 30 days of their release that we bring in all of the service providers that can be brought to bear. So everything that exists, it's, things from how do they get their driver's license or identification back, ID cards, employment opportunities, medical follow-up. So instead of just saying, hey, here's a prescription and go get it filled in 2 weeks, or here's a doctor and they're on the other side of town, they work with this person to understand their particular needs. And then if they are homeless, if they are not getting to a physical address where they will reside, we do everything we can to connect them with family, with somebody or some institution or facility that can take them in so they have a meal, a place to sleep. And they're not going back into that cycle that brought them into the Clark County Detention Center to begin with.
And the Clark County Detention Center, for people who don't know, is administered by LVMPD, so that's your organization. Let me ask you it this way. A lot of people don't think that police should be operating as social workers, that police should be responsible for this. Do you think that it's fair that Metro in our community is sort of becoming that frontline resource and follow-up for people experiencing homelessness, even those who, don't want those services maybe being offered by the municipalities or shelters or whatever?
Yeah, I would welcome if there was another way to deal with this, another influx of resources that, like what the city has done with clinicians in the ambulances, for example, so that they take those calls and the police don't have to respond. There's varying studies and data that shows it works in some places, it doesn't work in others. I think the size of our city, people know one phone number to call when they want services, and it's 911. So that'd be a big paradigm shift for our community. But there's a lot of opportunity if there's other folks for us that can assist in handling this so they don't become police or crime issues. The jail typically is the number one place where you'll find the most, it's always been dubbed the largest homeless shelter.
I've also heard it called the largest mental health facility in our state, the jail.
It is. So the jail itself is they have a whole section that's dedicated to folks that are suffering from mental illness, and they take psychotropic medicines while they're there. And that's a challenge when they leave, because if this is the medicine they need to stay stable and not have a negative impact on society, then it's difficult when they leave, because where is the follow-up, right?
Andy, I had occasion to be invited to an all-hands over at Metro not terribly long ago on the topic of homelessness. And there were people from all aspects of the community, medical folks, insurance, other stuff like that. So specifically about that meeting I went to, what I found was very interesting. And this was at LVMPD headquarters down off of Martin Luther King. And there was a presentation being made about Medicaid for the homeless population, and how, we could better facilitate getting medical treatment, which will alleviate a lot of problems. And it seemed like leadership at the time at this meeting from Metro was very interested in this. So where does the police department fit into these kind of solutions, like getting the population of people who are unhoused on Medicaid and get them access to insurance for the things that they need?
where we kind of get involved is, our captains in our area commands, we have 10 area commands. Take downtown, for example, right? The expectation of that captain is he is the ambassador in that neighborhood for that community, and he's the access point between the community and the entire bag of resources that Metro can bring to the table. And what we also know is because we're so well known in the community, because we're so big as an organization, that if we call a meeting, like you said, everybody was there.
I mean, I was inspired in that room, and I can see while we don't want to rely on Metro to be like handing out Medicaid cards when you're encountering people, it would be nice if there was a bridge that Metro was aware of to help facilitate, make that happen faster, more efficiently, to make sure it gets done somehow. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense, because I think that's really the goal is, if we can bring folks together and kind of bridge. Sometimes you have different groups doing the same thing that don't even know each other exist. And when you get them all in the room, you find out you have a duplication of efforts. You find out you have folks competing for the same, whatever's available in grant funding when they provide the same thing, where if they combine, that is where we can get our biggest bang for our buck. But it's also using, it's a community policing is the overall term. People don't always understand what that means, but what that is all about, it's having the community identify the priorities for that community or that neighborhood and figuring out what resources besides the police can be brought to bear on the problem. Because, we're a criminal justice, we're the police, right? Like, so what do you get when you call the police, right? We're going to try to solve the problem, but
you also have your limitations, and you also have your protocols, which, are cops. And that isn't always the same as hugs and help. Although I know you try to help, but it's not. Sometimes those ideas of what it is that cops do and what we'd like to see happen in society clash straight on.
Yeah, and typically you have a 25-year-old man or woman out there that's got a couple of years of a police experience trying to solve this decades-old problem, right? You have this guy over here screaming in your ear about one version of it, and then someone else over here.
And if it goes sideways in any way, it's not about like, well, we do need to solve this systemic problem. It's about acting in the moment, which may not be what people really want to see happen, but that's kind of from where you are, has to happen for police safety or all those other things, right?
Yeah, 100%, because those things, those interactions, if you look at anything that's caused our country to catch fire over the years or cause unrest, it's these little flashpoints that turn into big things when nothing's been done about it for 100 years prior to. And so that's the part that we have to continue to work towards. And that's what Metro's committed to. That's why you see we bring in those resources, because, we're trying to give away the problem, right? You can have it.
Yeah, and you and I have had very spirited conversations about the nature of policing and the issues that are in this country. This particular episode of CityCast is not about that at all. So I'm not letting you off the hook about, how the police approach things or anything. We're just talking about homelessness now, and you guys are in the mix. I mean, you are by default.
100%. But that is a great, even though we're not talking about it directly, look, I grew up in New York, right? And I remember when there was a facility in my hometown in Staten Island, it was called Willowbrook. And Willowbrook in Staten Island was the largest mental health facility in the state. And then a media guy, Geraldo Rivera, did this big expose on the conditions at Willowbrook and snuck in a camera. Anyway, it turned into this disaster, and people saw the deplorable conditions that folks were living in and being treated. And so it turned into, okay, close Willowbrook. Well, when they closed Willowbrook, where did everybody go, right? They just went out on the street. And so I think as an answer in society, when people can push 3 numbers on the phone and get a police response, the challenge for police executives and police leaders, and especially for police officers, is always, how do we solve this problem in a way that it's going to go away? And this problem doesn't go away through arrest. It doesn't go away through, just telling somebody to move along. It's far deeper than that. But I appreciate what you're saying, because this is the problem, right? We have not figured out a way as a country on how to deal with this. And the answer continually is put on the backs of young men and women that we hire and train to be police officers that are expected to go into neighborhoods and solve this problem in a way that's within line of the values of everybody that's lives there, that's talking about it. And that's never, you're never going to get a total agreement on it. But we're talking, the two things are completely intertwined. It's another example of what's been put on the backs of police officers to be the problem solver, when we would argue clearly this is not something I can solve, you can solve, but collectively there's answers.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
Isn't the point of traveling to get away from it all? To feel the best you've ever felt? Then maybe you should check out Aruba. You'll spend your time relaxing on cool, white, sandy beaches and floating in healing blue water. You'll meet locals brimming with gratitude for an island that redefines what a paradise can be. When your trip comes to an end, you won't need another vacation because you just had the vacation. That's the Aruba effect. Plan your trip at aruba.com.
We have a new mayor. I would love to hear what you hope that this new mayor of Las Vegas will do in the first few days of her administration to address homelessness.
Yeah, I mean, we've done good, over the years with our partnership with the city of Las Vegas, and I think when you look at, downtown 20 years ago, downtown, 9 years ago when I started there as the captain, how much that area has changed. I think the continued partnerships between the city, I hope that the mayor can work closely with the county so you don't have this duplication of efforts. You have a partnership.
Yeah. Have you seen a problem in the past with the county and the city cooperating?
Yeah, I want to avoid that. Like that's you just threw a grenade at me. We got to edit that part out. But
no, that stays.
I think what you see when you have two different governmental bodies, they just have to be in line, right? And of course, there's going to be differences. I mean, there's always differences of opinion amongst people on our staff, right? So,
well, let me ask Andy, if the mayor invites you up to her office and it's the first week, and she says to you, homelessness, what do you think I should do differently or know or even implement right away from your perspective as leadership of Metro? What do you tell her?
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, look, the first thing I say is do what we can to not make this a police problem. Change to the law is great, I guess, on some level. But I think if we can have government leaders move this away from being a police-centric solution driven by the police problem, then I think that takes a vision, right? Look, far be it for me to give a mayor advice. I'm only the undersheriff, but don't be short-sighted in our vision. Don't think arrests are going to solve the problem. The change in the law is not going to solve the problem. What is the long-term vision and strategic plan for 10, 15 years down the road? Because you look at cities that have had some success. San Antonio is one that comes to mind, and they built out an entire infrastructure there on how they deal with their homeless.
With private funds, and
right.
They actually have put housing on there, and that's not what we seem to be interested in.
Housing, job training, right? All the things that they do. Look for those models as a mayor. Interact with those other mayors. I mean, if this doesn't have to be a police problem, I'm good with that. Make it a priority because and I believe it has been to some degree, but make it a top priority, right? The outgoing mayor did a lot with veterans and homelessness. We've had a plan all along. Let's continue to build on what's been done, but where do we want it to be 10 years from now?
Andy, let me leave it this way. We're seeing people in distress or seemingly in really bad shape all over the valley. Sidewalks, freeway on-ramps, middle of the street, gas station, inside businesses, in their cars on the side of the road, really everywhere, every day. And I don't think that anyone wants to call the cops on these folks. So what can community members who care do? And then I'm going to follow up on that. What shouldn't they be doing? So what can they do and what shouldn't they be doing?
Well, let's look at the model, right, of what they can do. Let's just look at this from a practical perspective. So they do call 311 or 911, and a police officer shows up. So what options does that officer have? What's in the tool bag, right? So from an enforcement perspective, if they've broken the law, you can make an arrest or issue a citation. Those are two things he has available or she has available to them, right? The other option is call an ambulance, right? If an ambulance comes and there's a medical reason to call an ambulance, they have that option to call an ambulance.
But if people don't want to call 911 or 311 because they don't like those options, they don't want to have to get your agency involved, what can they do as citizens? And I guess, again, what shouldn't they be doing?
Approaching people is sometimes a good idea to have that human interaction, but you have to be mindful of your surroundings and mindful. So I don't really recommend that unless you have such a comfort level. But the other thing though is if you have a connection to service providers in the city or the county that, different places that come and do outreach, church groups, et cetera. But always too, elected officials are important to include in that so they're aware of the problems occurring in their districts or their wards so that they can see what resources are being brought to bear on these types of problems, especially if it's a systemic person, someone that pretty much lives in that area or in that neighborhood and is unhoused.
So what do you think if you see a person that is on the freeway every day, which I think is a hazard to a person that they could get hit by a car or whatever, instead of calling Metro or something, should they call their elected official? And does the elected official just wind up turning around and calling Metro?
Yeah, that's typically what they do. But what they can do as well is the freeway is a good example. The people living under the freeway, I would make sure it's not just a solo patrol officer going out there saying, hey, here's my 4 or 5 options. Bring those service providers to bear on the problem, especially if it's multiple people involved in an encampment that you can get, you need a certain number of interactions sometimes. I've told them, I get a different number all the time, 1,000, 100, whatever. But
yeah, no, you hear that.
You need a certain number of interactions. And look, that one time where you have an opportunity to go out and engage folks in a conversation and say, look, we know we talked about this before, but what about today? Is today the day you can go to a crossroads or a detox? Or is this, I always get to mobilize resources and bring those to bear on the problem.
Andy, that makes me think of something you said earlier. You talk about how Metro now has access to social workers and others that you partner with after you vet them, et cetera. How do I get, as an average citizen, a way to trigger, if it is Metro, to be Metro with the social workers or Metro with the other resources that could help that person that we're looking at?
Yeah, typically what we see with those is when we have these large encampments, that's when you get that mobilized team. And that's what they're stood up to do, is address these encampments. The single interactions, what it takes from those is a referral from the patrol officer who goes out there to the homeless outreach team to say, hey, here's a person, and they can pick up the phone and call. I've done that myself when I've interacted with people. I can pick up the phone, call, and say, hey, I have someone here that's, he's holding up a sign, says he's a vet, et cetera, et cetera. What can we bring? He wants to talk to somebody. He wants to get off this corner. And they can typically come out or make arrangements to come out and meet. And then you hope that they follow through on that. I always follow up and say, hey, what were the results of that? When I say you hope they follow through, what I mean is when the person's interacting with me and they say, yes, I'll take services, I know that time is of the essence. I have to bring those resources to bear on that problem.
Are you telling your officers that if they encounter these folks who look like they might want or might be amenable to something, to fill out some kind of form or follow up with those social workers for that individual? Is that viable?
Yeah, it's as simple as just getting on the radio and asking, hey, is there anybody from the homeless outreach team logged on? Are they in this area? And then they connect by phone and say, I have a willing case right here for you, something that you work on. We do see a lot of that where our folks are picking up the phone, calling, getting somebody over there, and then bringing a resource to bear. We see that a lot.
Yeah, and maybe if someone was reporting it even to a non-emergency number citizen, they could kind of mention that. We've seen this guy here for a bunch of time. It seems like if you brought out a social worker, it might be helpful. That's something a citizen can do?
Sure.
Last question, Andy, because, citizens do want to do good, I think. I think that's our community. There's a lot of big-hearted people. But we also hear that Metro says, don't do these gatherings in parks. Don't hand out food and stuff to people where they are. Why is that?
Well, it turns into a free-for-all from time to time. In my experience, too, working downtown, we would see this a lot at Catholic Charities where someone would pull up in a car and have, boxes of clothes and food, and it just fights and stabbings and violence over the handouts. And then you have the people delivering the stuff getting attacked. It turns into a little bit of a melee. And the reason, too, is there's so many organized ways to do it with folks there to make sure it's done in an orderly fashion. We get it. People have a big heart. But if they wanted to do something, you can simply, if it's downtown, it's coordinated with the downtown area command, coordinated with whatever is nearby, especially the church groups. Folks have a big heart. You're right, David. I think there's enough heart in this community and enough people in this community that want to do something good that we should all be a little bit impatient as to how long it's taken to actually come to a good solution to this.
Under Sheriff Andy Walsh, thank you so much for joining us on CityCast Las Vegas.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
And now, please enjoy this fascinating conversation with CityCast contributor Kim Foster and Dr. Dempsey from JuveMD about her trailblazing medical practice for women managing menopause.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Foster, and I am here today with Dr. Andrea Dempsey. And ladies in your 40s and up, you're going to want to listen because her medical practice, JuveMD, located in Summerlin, is dedicated to helping women manage the life-changing effects of menopause. And don't let anyone tell you that they are not life-changing, because they are. The brain fog, the inattention, the hot flashes, the changes in your sex drive, and the way society looks at us differently once we get to a certain age, it's a lot. If this is you, I really recommend listening to this segment. Dr. Dempsey is a board-certified internal medicine physician that has been practicing in Vegas since 2007. But seeing the need for women in various stages of menopause, she shifted her practice from internal medicine to helping women with balancing their hormones, losing weight, and living their best lives. We're so happy to have more of this in town. And Dr. Dempsey, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kim. I am so excited to be here. This is my passion. I do this full-time, hormone replacement therapy for women and men. And women are not crazy. Like, we were told that our brains are not working the same way. Our bodies don't feel the same way. We're not aging the way we want. And so I made it my practice to do the research, go to the education, and find out more about what is available for women. Over the past 12 years, I've done a lot of hormone replacement in the world of bioidenticals, but most recently I changed my practice even more so to deal with pellets. And I've seen a stability in my patients, happiness, and it's really just my full-time passion.
All right, let's talk about this some more, because this topic is really near and dear to me. This feeling like you are going crazy, which is something that I think a lot of women in perimenopause and menopause talk about, where you just don't feel like yourself. And a lot of times you'll walk into a doctor and they'll say, oh, that's just stress, or you're too young to be feeling that way. How important is it for women to have access to doctors who get their experience? And how do you do this with women? And what makes it different for you?
I think starting first and foremost, it's compassion. I mean, perimenopause can start in their early 40s, and menopause on average in the United States could be 51. It's a long time for women to be experiencing this, in addition to our regular stressors, to be told that we're not doing well because we're under stress or we're not getting enough sleep, and then compounding the fact that estrogen does have a physiological benefit for our brain. And even more so, there's studies right now that are showing the benefit of estrogen on the brain. So going back to finding a doctor that will not just piecemeal together your diagnosis, something for your sleep, something for your mood, something for your achy bones, and thinking that that piecemeal approach is actually going to help you, and not entertaining the idea that hormones are driving a lot of these symptoms, and that actually can help women get motivated, can help them to sleep better, to exercise better, and then their bodies actually feel better. So that's, their relationships improve. And then finding a doctor that is compassionate to look at the history, look at the patients as people that are going through a lot of things, and noting that over the next, say, 10 to 14 years, the labs will change, the circumstances will change, and the doses could change. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, for sure.
Wow, this is amazing. Can you talk just a minute about the research that most of us are aware of that says that having hormones is detrimental, that it can increase your risk of cancer? For people who are like on the sidelines and wanting to think about this, but are worried about, that particular research, has that been debunked?
A lot of it has. I would just say the last 16 years of my practice, I've thought a lot about this Women's Health Initiative that came out in 2000, because I was sort of like that black sheep thinking, well, it's just not adequate to discuss all women when the average age of that study was 63 years of age. Women starting hormones that at that age, 10 years after going through menopause, was just not an adequate sample of looking at perimenopausal women and women entering into menopause. And in fact, some of this has been debunked to show that within the first 5 years of menopause, using hormone replacement at this time is actually giving the most benefit to the heart, potentially up to 40% reduction of cardiovascular disease, and also the brain benefits.
Okay, so you mentioned bioidentical and you've mentioned the pellets. Can you just get really nitty-gritty and explain what are the pellets, what are bioidentical hormones, and just give us like a rundown on what we should expect when we come into the office.
Okay. So blood work is essential. I mean, for anyone saying that it doesn't really tell us anything, it does. So looking at an extensive panel, estrogen, follicle-stimulating hormone, testosterone, thyroid, and then bioidentical hormones are those identically made to like what our body makes. So estradiol, testosterone, progesterone. So you can replace those in other forms, creams, patches, gels, injections. And I did that for many years until I decided to go to a conference as I was told that the testosterone benefits were superior to the prescription medication for bone density treatment. I thought, I've got to hear this conference. And I was just floored. And so the pellet delivery mechanism is interesting because it is a small procedure performed in the office by me. The little tiny grain of rice of, say, testosterone or like a sesame seed size of estrogen will go under your skin every 4 months. It's really well tolerated. And then it leads to a stability of these estrogen and testosterone levels because of the way that the delivery system. So it's cardiac output delivered. So every time your heart pumps, you're getting a little sampling of this testosterone and estrogen. Progesterone can't be delivered this way. It has to be done in a pill. However, like the blood work that I've seen and the advantage to this, because I was comparing and contrasting all of these years of patients' symptoms and changing these little doses of creams versus just tailoring these pellet doses, I thought, this is really incredible. So over the next 6 months of trying on myself and my other patients, I made the change to my practice to do this full time. And here we are like 5 years later. I'm excited. It's really exciting.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. This gives me so much hope as a woman who, is in menopause now. And for years, really struggled not knowing how to handle the changes in my body. So this really makes me excited. This is a fantastic interview. So much information for us. I am so grateful to have you here, Dr. Andrea Dempsey from Juve MD. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Kim, for having me. I had such a great time talking about hormones, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Me too. If everybody wants to take a look, you can go to juvemd.com and you can check out more information, how to book an appointment, and the things that Dr. Dempsey can do for you to help get you through this really challenging time. Thanks so much for listening.
That's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, go tell a friend. You could rate our show too wherever you listen. Just go on that platform and hit 5 stars. Leave us a review too and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky.